and he could do it ahead of time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no problem putting that on there.
Yeah, just some kind of,
Just so he knows.
say, there's a possibility site plan review will be required prior to renewal of this license, something like that.
Okay, so wait. Okay, yeah, Mr. Rowland.
Who's going to determine whether there's a site plan review needed or not? That's the question I have. I think we've discussed this a number of times. Is this,
I think it has to come from CPC.
Well, see,
Well, again, I think CPC is going to take a position, and again, we're putting the applicants on notice that we have the local zoning authority, the zoning bylaw. The enforcement officer will be the building inspector, but we've got the planning commission that gets involved in the process that are going to weigh in on these things. And you know, if the applicant happens to disagree, then there's going to be some sort of an appeal process for them to just disagree. You know, hopefully it doesn't end up in litigation, but there's no guarantee that it won't. But at some point, we have to get it resolved.
The feeling I have, site plan review is wrapped up with special permitting, not necessarily with licensing.
Well, again,
And I think there's
If you recall, in this particular applicant's request last year, when he was at another site, we were talking about the ancillary business on a site where the primary business is a specific type of thing. And if this is not an ancillary use, I mean, right now we've got a bowling alley, a roast beef shop, and flowers. You know, how they all get together, you know, I don't know.
They call it combination place.
Yeah, combination.
combination place.
Yeah, but I mean, so that's the issue, is that, you know, what's the primary use of the property, and you're gonna have a transit vendor, you know, come in a few times out of the year for an ancillary use, and the zoning bylaws address that, and that's the issue that the CPC has, so.
I know what the issue is, but I don't follow the explanation of the CPC at all on this particular issue. But anyway.
Okay, so we have a motion before us, and everybody's comfortable with the form in which it's in, and that we will attach some sort of a memorandum from the administration explaining that site plan review will be, I suppose, required for them to go through prior to them getting it renewed at this point.
I think that's my question, is that we have the authority to say that it will be required if in fact it's not required. My only, I'm not sure is legally is a site plan review needed, and under what legal, you know, jurisdiction or whatever. That's my only question. So, I mean, is there some way that we can find out? I mean, the town, other than just us saying there is, and somebody else, you know, saying there isn't, you know, who determines?
I don't know that we've ever asked town council for an opinion necessarily, render an opinion on this specific application or even the other one. We didn't necessarily ask them specifically, other than he said, if it was this, it's that.
If it's grandfathered.
If it's grandfathered, it's okay. If it's not grandfathered, it's not okay.
Right.
This particular applicant obviously is not a grandfathered situation. Mr. Connors, again, the burden's on him to prove that he was grandfathered. So, I mean, the issue came down to that. So we've got a response as to what falls under site plan review if certain circumstances happen to occur. So I think we have that opinion now.
Well, that's my point then, if in
And
fact.
based upon that opinion, it would appear as though it would have to go through site plan review.
Well, that's the point, in fact, that we should be putting on this fact that site plan review will be required, not if it is required, because now we're leaving it open, and it goes back to who's gonna determine that it is or it isn't. That's the only, I just feel that we're kind of leaving the thing wide open again, and I think it's gonna be the last minute, somebody's gonna come in and he's gonna say, well, we didn't need it, and his attorney says he didn't need it, and the CPC still says it does.
Well,
That's
you
why
know.
the chair suggested maybe we want to incorporate it in the motion, but that's okay.
Well, let's look at it from a realistic point. If you want to make that point that way, all this board has to do as the licensing authority is say, site plan review will be required, period. That's the end of it. We have that right as a licensing board to say, and we can send them there. And from what I could understand from town council the last night at the town meeting, my understanding was that if it wasn't grandfathered, he hadn't been there for over 20 years, it is in fact required to go for site plan review. I mean, that's the way I heard it. And I would just like to get something from the
I'd like to amend the
CPC. This
motion
is
to
the
put that
reason
on
we
there,
think.
site plan review will be required.
And that's the
Next
end
year.
of it.
Subsequent license.
Subsequent
Any
license.
subsequent license, site plan review, then that's the end of it. We don't have to discuss it every year, it's over. So why don't we just make it a policy, that's the end of it.
Fine,
That way, we're not leaving anything
I agree.
out in the
I agree.
open. It's
All right on there.
So, Mr. Vino moves to amend the main motion to include Statement that subsequent licenses, license renewals on this application will require site plan review.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Smith. On the motion to amend, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, unanimous. On the main motion as amended, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, unanimous. All right.
So he can sell his flowers for this year, and next year he's got to get a site plan. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Any other license renewals? Do you have anything else in front of you there, Mr. Bagan?
That's it on the licenses.
Okay, very good. Street acceptances. Order of taking. Oscar's Way.
Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the order of taking for Oscar's Way.
Second.
Motion was made and seconded. Any discussion? Again, this was acted on favorably. CPC said it was all set. It was acted on favorably at town meeting, as would be the case for all the rest of these. And we're ready to accept the street. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Unanimous. Whitcomb Way.
Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the order of taking for Whitcomb Way.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Bagan, you can handle the next two.
I think I can. Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the order of taking for Palomino Drive.
Second.
Giddy up.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman. Oops.
Mr. Bagan.
I move to sign the order of taking for Old Coach Road.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? Again, people up in that area, I think that when they came down, their concerns were allayed a little bit. In fact, there's still some bond money out there to take care of the trees that are dying.
Yeah.
And DPW is going to handle it, so. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Unanimous. Why don't we sign these things? Why don't we go into town administrator's report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of updates on issues. One is we now have a new library director. Her name is Helena Minton, and she still is until she comes in mid-May, the assistant director of the Peabody Libraries. A number of years of experience there, and we're pleased to have her, and she should be starting on May 14th. Once she comes on, then we will look at the position of assistant director and have her involved with the selection process for that. But I'm pleased now we have a very experienced individual heading up our library department. And in the near future, after she comes on in May, I'll have her attend the board of selectmen meeting and introduce her to the board.
Be great. Look forward to welcoming aboard. Hopefully we get some stability back down there at the library, because I think and I know you've been spending some time over there, and the trustees have been doing a good job, and so has the staff, as far as holding things together and keeping the programming going, and done a good job. And this will stabilize things.
No dog collector.
No.
Yes, next, at our last meeting, when we did the determination of bond amount for the town clerk, there's a question of how the bond amount was determined. Under statute, that's determined by the Department of Revenue. There is a rate of how much bond is required, determined by how much money is handled by the town clerk. In our case, she handles the lowest amount under the rate schedule, which is $30,000 or less, which would mean the required bond was $6,500. The $14,000 figure has been set by the Board of Selectmen since 1986.
86?
Since '86.
No increase there.
Just along those ranges with the bond ratings, is there any indication what our bond rating is going to be now that we've depleted our free cash?
That's a different kind of bond.
It's a different kind of bond, but
Yeah.
while we're on bonds.
Generally, when we look at the bond rates, we look at back going toward the fall when our, free cash gets renewed and certified and such.
Free cash is certified.
So at this point, there is no change.
No change until the end of the fall.
But
It'll be the
the problem I have, we got a bonded issue coming up on the ballot questions for $300,000. That bonding for that $300,000 is gonna be set prior to the certification of free cash, I would think so. How is our bond rating gonna be effective when we have zero free cash? That's my question, I guess.
We've had zero free cash going in out-of-town meetings for the past number of years. It
No,
has-
but I'm not talking about that, Tom. I'm talking, if in fact the ballot question is passed in May for the $300,000
It's a debt exclusion.
as a debt exclusion, right?
So it doesn't affect free cash.
It doesn't, but we're still gonna have to pay the bond. And what I'm saying is, what will our bond ratings be? Will they change?
My assumption is the bond rating won't change because of this.
Because it has no effect on the free cash situation, because you're doing it as a debt exclusion outside the...
Right, it's a debt exclusion, it's
Right.
paid outside of
Right.
our operation budget, but the bonding company's still gonna look at the financial ability of this town to pay, even though it's gonna be paid through taxation. It won't have any effect on the actual bond rating for operational plans of the budget.
It shouldn't, because it's being a debt exclusion question, they know you have the money coming in
Through
through
taxation.
taxation to pay the bond.
Money's there.
Okay.
It's guaranteed.
I mean, I personally think that's why the finance committee and the school committee decided not to go for the bonding at town meeting, because we didn't have any money to pay for it. And that's a conclusion I come to, and I thought it was kind of not fair to explain to the town why we passed that article over without an explanation. But I was gonna bring that up under open business anyway, so it's fine.
It's,
I think in the discussions that we had, prior to town meetings, again, in those Wednesday and Friday sessions, we talked about it, that issue hadn't even been brought to the finance committee, and the budget had been set, so it wasn't factored in anywhere, which is correct. It wasn't factored into the budgetary process at all, because it was a late arrival, especially putting it on the warrant. And I think it was as you said, the conclusion of the finance committee, and obviously the majority of this board, and the school committee, to hold off, wait for the general public to vote in relation to the debt exclusion, and handle it that way.
Well, I don't want to get into a debate about it, but this board had nothing to do with it. There was absolutely no discussion on this board about that $300,000. It was simply moved by the finance committee and school committee, I guess it was, or by yourself, at town meeting to pass the article over. I just thought there should have been an explanation as to why we were going to pass it over, because we certainly didn't discuss it at this board.
No, because
Nobody made a recommendation to us either.
No, right, because
But anyway, yeah.
it wasn't factored in. Right.
Okay.
okay.
Go ahead, Tom, yeah.
Yes, and obviously, from the board, we have another piece of this landlocked property up on West Street.
Yeah, we're on West Street.
Yeah, where is it?
That's I think it's a very small paper street up, oh gosh, I forget where it is now. But it's about 4,200 square feet. Assessed valuation is minimal, $12,000.
Martin's Pond. I think it's up in Martin's Pond.
West
Yeah,
Street.
Martin's Pond, you're right, yeah.
What was it? Well, 4,200 square feet over there. Could be
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot, that's a lot of property.
Remember that when we come to sell it?
Right, yeah. It's a lot of property.
Yeah.
If you can get to it.
And continue on the personnel update, the Human Resources Administrator, we're fine-tuning the job description. It's going through the department heads. We should hopefully have that advertised within the next 2 weeks for hopefully a July 1st position.
In relation to, again, Havel Street properties, both
Havel
properties?
Street's on, they did the home inspection on it Friday, so everything is going along, track for completion for mid-May.
Okay.
Is that still with the first
Yes.
bidder or the second?
First
Still with the
bidder.
first
That's
bidder.
the first bidder.
So he came back in?
He's
back? Okay.
He was always in, but we got him closer.
Locked in.
Right.
Locked in, yeah.
Because he didn't want to go for it this year, he wanted to put it off till next year.
And again, Reading Light as far as baking, the other one is because of the weather, pushing it out. It was initially was going to be June,
End of June.
end of June, so probably going to be a little bit later as far as vacating,
Move this stuff?
move this stuff. But again, that's mostly been driven by the weather.
Okay.
Can't fault it for that. Out of our control. Anything else, Mr. Younger?
No, it's fine, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Old and new business?